In today's show, I'm going to take a look at Uki Waza, the floating technique. It's one of judo's sutemi waza, or sacrifice techniques, and it really is underappreciated. So you'll see what I mean. Keep watching. Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Scott, and welcome to another episode of Freestyle Judo. Well, in today's show, I want to take a really hard look at Uki Waza, the floating technique. I think it's kind of a bum rap, but we'll talk about that a little more here in a second. And also, I want to look at the four elements, maybe 3.5 elements of every judo technique. And I'll give you a tease there, but we'll come back to that a little later in the show. But right now, let's take a look at Uki Waza. Uki Waza, floating technique. It's kind of a bum rap because, but by its very name, it's floating. It's not very macho, is it? Well, actually, it is pretty macho throw because to me, I think it's one of those throws that's a total package. You not only throw your opponent, but you get them on the ground and you can immediately transition to generally a pinning situation from here, but maybe something else as well. So it's one of those twofers. It's a throw, and even if the throw doesn't work, you can still get them to the ground with some really good skill. So it's a great technique. And Uki Waza is a sutemi waza. It's a sacrifice technique in judo. What Jeff Gleason and maybe some others, but certainly the first I heard about was Gleason calling it a body weight throw, using the weight of your body to throw your opponent. And that makes sense too. But it's often confused with other sacrifice throws. And those throws that it's confused with are Tani Otoshi and Yoko Otoshi primarily, but also to a somewhat degree, Yoko Guruma. And so we're going to look at that. We're going to look at how these throws, all these sacrifice throws, Uki Waza, Yoko Otoshi, Tani Otoshi certainly, how similar they are, and then how it can be confused also with Yoko Guruma, Uki Waza can. So, but let's look at right now about the similarities between the three throws of Uki Waza, Tani Otoshi, Yoko Otoshi. The first video I'm going to show really covers that. Okay, and it covers, actually physically you'll see an Uki Waza done, a Yoko Otoshi done, and a Tani Otoshi done. Okay, fundamentally, the direction you throw your opponent dictates what the throw is. There's more to it than that, really. I mean, obviously, the body mechanics have to be a little bit different because you're throwing an opponent to a different direction. Okay, Uki Waza, you throw him to his front or front corner. Okay, and Tani Otoshi, you throw him to his back or back corner. Okay, and Yoko Otoshi, you throw him directly to the side. Yoko lateral or side drop. And I think the names are pretty descriptive. Now, Tani Otoshi retains its old Jiu-Jitsu name. It's a valley drop, but it could have been named better. But those are the three differences, the three throws that are very, very similar in style. But again, biomechanically, they have to be a bit different, but they're very similar in their application as well, at least in what happens to your opponent. Okay, just remember, one, you throw him forward to his front corner, front side, the other directly to the side, the other directly to his back. Later on in the show, in the videos, we're going to get into how Yoko Guruma side wheel is sometimes, more than sometimes fairly often, confused with Uki Waza, because in Yoko Guruma, you throw your opponent to his front or front corner as well. And we're going to cover that. We're going to cover that because I think it's important to know the differences between these types of sacrifice techniques. There are differences, and they have different biomechanical makeups. And it's somebody may say, well, what's the difference? I mean, you're splitting hairs when you do this. Well, honestly, if you don't split hairs, you don't know what's on the scalp. You don't know what it's made of. You don't know how this functions. And if you want to know how to biomechanically make a movement do better, as a coach, I'm thinking this way, and I want my students to think this way as well. And I hope you think this way as well. Let's parse this apart. Let's break this apart. Let's break it down, and let's synthesize it back up. Let's build it back up where it's a good whole thing that happens. But anyway, that being said, Uki Waza is a great throw. I think it's underrated, and hopefully if you watch today, maybe you'll practice it a little more. But that being said, also, let's get into Uki Waza. So the first video is just a kind of introduction to Uki Waza, and it's also we show the differences between Uki Waza and the other throwing techniques, the Tani Otoshi and Yoko Otoshi primarily. So without any further ado, let's look at that first video. Here we go. Let's take a look at Uki Waza, and let's first, before we talk about this specific Uki Waza, Uki Waza means, Uki means to float, UKI, float, or to straddle over something, to skim over something, okay? Waza is technique, okay? So you're straddling, skimming them, floating them, technique, okay? There are a lot of variations of Uki Waza. It's a very good throw, actually. I think it's highly underrated, but it is a good technique. It's a sacrifice technique, or Sutuga Waza. But the difference between Uki Waza, Yoko Otoshi, and Tani Otoshi, they're three very similar sacrifice throws. Okay, it's just the direction you're throwing your opponent. Uki Waza, if I would be throwing Mike, I would be throwing Mike to his front or front corner, to his front. Okay, that's Uki Waza. Tani Otoshi, valley drop. Okay, that's literally what it means, valley drop. I would be throwing him to his backside. The footwork is very, very similar. Very similar. The throws almost look identical except the direction of the throw. Yoko Otoshi, side drop or lateral drop, is an Uki Waza or Tani Otoshi, but you're doing it to your opponent's directly to its side. And that's the difference. So they have three different names because of the three different directions. But they're very similar look. They're very similar look. So if you learn Uki Waza, you can pretty well pick up Tani Otoshi or Yoko Otoshi, or vice versa with any of those. They're very, very interchangeable. But all right, so you saw the differences between those three sacrifice techniques. So they are very similar. But they have to be different enough that they are certainly separate entities. I mean, you're throwing them in different directions. So they're close, but not that close, but close enough. They're close enough. And people do confuse them. People will, maybe call them one thing or the other, and that's common. I mean, that's a common thing. And hopefully this show and other avenues of learning for you, you can maybe see the difference here. Okay, the second video is going to be about, it's a 2-on-1 grip into an Uki Waza. And I came up with a 2-on-1 grip a long time ago when I really got into Sambo especially. But early in my career, I would try the Uki Waza, and it just wasn't working out. It worked for a while, but my standard grip, a lapel and sleeve, just wasn't working, and I needed to change it. So I took a back grip, and that still didn't do the trick. So I had to figure out a way to get my body closer yet, because the thing that was really keeping me from throwing people was my body was too far apart from my opponent. There's too much distance between me and my opponent. So I had to learn to close that better. And of course, it comes with gripping, because like in a lot of situations, to throws, the grip is the answer. It's how you adapt that grip to make it work for that particular throw and make it work for you and your body type. And I figured that out on my own. Others have done too. I mean, I'm not saying that I invented this, but I've seen other people do it as well. But this 2-on-1 arm drag, this 2-on-1 sleeve grip, this 2-on-1 arm grip really did help me get it. And so I got a near grip and a deep back grip, 2-on-1, tied them up, and that got me closer upper body wise, so then I could drop under my opponent and throw them over me. So I could get underneath, drop lower, lower the center of gravity, under my opponent's center of gravity, and throw them. So this 2-on-1 grip I thought was very, very helpful. And that's what we're showing here in these series of videos here to start anyway. So we'll be using the 2-on-1 grip primarily. You can use other grips as well, but the idea, if you do use other grips, just remember you want to get your body closer to them. You want to get the upper bodies close, so that gives you the opportunity to drop under his center of gravity and throw them in a sacrifice, using your body weight to throw them. So that being said, let's look at video number 2 on a 2-on-1 grip to Uki Waza. So here we go. So this version of Uki Waza, floating or straddling technique, skimming technique, is what we're going to do is same 2-on-1 across grip, deep grip here like this. But this time Derek, instead of stepping in with his right foot and spinning, he's going to step pretty far across Mike and spin him over. There's going to be more torque, and it's a longer throw. And you'll see the difference when he does it. This is a little wider throw. He'll have to split a little wider too with his legs. So this is really kind of ideal for taller guys. Okay,
so as we take a big step here, you want to try and get past his foot. Okay, almost like you're going to turn the corner, but you'll never turn that corner. But as long as you keep that in mind, you won't go too shallow. So we take a big step.
There you go. And that's a real classic looking Uki Waza. Here's how you split wide, and the guy that totally over the front area. That is more what you're going to see. The first one, that could be confused a lot with, like I said, on a, the short, tighter inside. Look at the difference here. The grip, the foot. So watch Derek's foot. See, he's coming in shorter here, and then he's doing it. Now the second one, he's coming in wider, and that's the difference. Now that's going to measure out differently. When Derek does the shorter step inside, the choppier step to the inside, he's going to be throwing Mike more over his thigh. Okay. This one, you throw him more over the lower part of your leg. So let's look at that second one again. Watch how the lower part of the leg is what Mike goes over. See? So there's a bit of a difference there. It's subtle. It's still Uki Waza. It's just a little bit different application of Uki Waza. There you go. Okay, so that's a bit different of application of Uki Waza.
Okay. It'll appeal to some people more than others. If you've got shorter legs, you tend to be shorter than your opponent. You might not be doing that variation, but it still works if you like a little bit more momentum in your throw.
And again, understand, this is just one grip to be used for Uki Waza. For any throw, you can do any number of grips, but this is a really good ideal grip. And because a lot of times, grip 2-on-1 just like you did. Look, if you're gripping a guy, we were talking about this, you guys were talking about this over there. Mike ain't stupid. He's not going to let Derek have his arm. He's going to pull it back in tight. When he does, that sets the move up better. So really, that grip is a good strong grip, because if he pulls that back, that's your cue to step in and let him have it. Okay.
And a lot of guys that have had wrestling will square up and try and push away, which is exactly what you want.
Yeah, you want, if he's nice and square, you're going to throw it. You're just going to clack it, So that's what we do. Do it one more time. Pull back from that grip. So if Mike does pull back, that's my grip.
Yep.
Pull back. Well, wait, you got the idea, right?
Do it one more time.
All right. There you go. Okay?
It helps when you don't lose your grip.
Yeah. Try this. Josh, that was quite good. Right. Okay, now we're going to take that 2-on-1 grip and we're going to just modify the Uki Waza. This next video will show how a shorter person can do Uki Waza. This next video is, this next clip, it shows how if you have shorter legs or you want to take a shorter step in between your opponent's legs and throw them. And now this also gets to an area where it looks kind of like a Yokogaruma too, the side wheel. And so that being said, we're going to show the 2-on-1 grip with a little short inside step to the Uki Waza, because we're still splitting wide and throwing them over the leg, but how it can be confused with Yokogaruma. And we're going to show you a Yokogaruma in comparison. So this next video, this next series of videos here, will be dealing with the 2-on-1 grip to a shorter step in to Uki Waza, and also how it looks like Yokogaruma and how you'll see a Yokogaruma. So here we go on the third video. There we go. Take it to 2-on-1. You're going to come this side. Okay. All right. So basically, it's this, guys. We're going to start with this grip. Okay. We're going to get a 2-on-1. So Derek's got his right hand on Mike's sleeve here low. Okay. And his left hand is grabbing deep. Nice, strong back grip. Now, the key thing here, guys, is don't let this elbow float. You're going to be using this elbow and hand together. You're steering with a lot. You're doing a lot of steering with this left hand in this throw, okay? You're also doing a lot of steering with this hand here. So your hikite and your surite are kind of interchangeable here almost, in a way. So what's going to happen is Derek's going to spin around and pull Mike's arm in, and as he does that, he's going to, this particular variation, we'll do another one later, he's going to step in kind of deep between Mike's legs and split his own legs and drop like he does. There you go. That's not too good. See how the grip is? Real tight grip. See that? And when he steps in, now, so his right hand is low on the sleeve. And as he does that, that's when he lowers his level. He drops really low and he splits. And there you go. When he throws it, when Derek throws Mike, he's throwing him pretty much in the thigh area, across his thigh. The thigh is where you're going to be doing it. So it's a pretty deep step into it, okay? And it is a common mistake to confuse any of these sacrifice techniques together. I mean, in the heat of the moment, the spur of the moment, you can see it maybe happen at a competition and say, boy, that was a great Yoko Garuma, or that was a great Uki Waza. You might confuse them, okay? And also, another easily confused two throws are Uki Waza and Yoko Otoshi, side drop, because Yoko Otoshi throws directly to the side, Uki Waza more to the front corner. And even then, you might confuse Yoko Otoshi with Tani Otoshi, because Tani Otoshi is directly to the opponent's back, but could be to his back corner as well. So, you know, they kind of blend. And so these throws, these sacrifice throws, do tend to blend together, and they look a lot alike. And that causes confusion. But it's important to know that there are differences. So we can, you know, the structure of them is different. Of each of them is different. Again, they're using the weight of your body to throw your opponent. It's a pretty simple idea, but it gets kind of tough in execution of how you want to do it. And again, whether you throw somebody with an Uki Waza or a Yoko Garuma or whatever it may be, if somebody calls it a different name and than you think it is, fine. Don't get upset about it. You know, no matter what you call it, just call it ippon. So that's a good way to look at the differences of these names, okay? But the names are important too. Don't get me wrong, that they do show the differences between the different body mechanics, but you know, they do blend together. A lot of elements, each one happens all the time. So there you go. Now the last video in this series is Uki Waza in a no-gi situation. And Derek was teaching this at John Saylor's training camp one year in Perrysville, Ohio with TJ Barnett. And here's a great example of how you have to control your opponent's upper body. Okay, now we've got no handles with a gi. You know, I don't have a belt, I don't have a jacket, I can't grab him with these convenient handles, you know, this jacket. So I got to figure out a way to tie him up to control his upper body and get him bent over. In this particular case, Derek is going to use a front headlock type move, an overhooked situation, like a guillotine type, front guillotine type thing. But notice what he's doing with TJ. He's bending him over. He's bending him at the waist, okay? And that puts all of TJ's weight forward, and he's off balance, and Derek is controlling him by closing the gap between Derek's body and TJ's body. You'll see it when we show it here. So it's really important how you control that upper body and then drop under his center of gravity and throw him over your extended leg, making it an Uki Waza. This throw, by the way, you'll see it's ideal to use against wrestlers or other people who tend to go directly forward. You know, one straight line forward. They tend to bend over at the waist with their head and shoulders forward ahead of their hips. That puts their weight off balance. Maybe for collegiate wrestling, freestyle wrestling, that's great. But in the grappling sports we do, judo, sambo, sports, jiu-jitsu, that type of thing, that's not necessarily a good thing, because you'll see TJ is bent over, and he's doing it on purpose here in this video to teach, but his weight is too far forward. And Derek is taking advantage of that as well by closing the gap and keeping that weight forward and then throwing TJ directly in the direction he wants to go, forward. So you'll see what I mean. The fourth video is a no-gi application of Uki Waza. So here we go.
So if I have a hold of this, okay, now what I can do is I can actually start working his legs. Now the easiest one that I found is, again, if I'm going forwards and backwards and it's not working so well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and push again, and if he pushes back into me.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Okay.
Do it again.
Down, okay, I'm pushing here, okay, he pushes back, I try again, he pushes back.
And judo guys, that's Uki Waza.
Yeah.
Okay, you old timers, Uki Waza.
Right, it's not backwards. That's the one big thing I want to stress here. I'm not coming back here and then rolling back and doing this, okay? I'm pushing in, and then I'm turning sideways and tripping him sideways. Just like that. Okay? If I was going to do it without the movement, okay, I would turn this way. And see how he twists over there? If I go backwards, I don't have the torque anymore of his head and shoulders. But if I turn sideways, okay, sideways, right? You can also rotate out this way and catch him. The back of your calf or your foot or your heel should make contact with the leg.
The obvious thing here, guys, is the leg. Everybody saw the leg was, everybody keyed in on that, didn't they? The hips are the important thing.
Right.
The movement of his hips, that's why he said this works, and it does, because his hips shift under him. It's not a leg throw. You don't stick your leg out and he falls over it. How he stepped under. Can you demo again? Watch the hip movement this time instead of the leg so much. See the hips? We always say, everything leads with the hips. We start in that. There's a great example of it, controlling with the hips. And as shown there, I mean, we're using a guillotine type, front headlock type situation. You can use any type of a tie-up where you can control his upper body, control his head. And it is an appendage to control, just like his arms and legs. So you want to control it. So any type of a tie-up you can use where you can get your body close and enable yourself to drop under his center of gravity and throw him over your leg. You can develop that into a good Uki Waza, or any sacrifice technique for that matter. So any grip will do, but this one we showed in this last clip here was a pretty ideal one. It works quite well, actually. So that being said, I'd like to transition to this transitions directly into this next topic, which is Kazushi, Sukuri, Kake, and that next element, that third and a half element, what I call Kime. Okay, and we'll explain it in a second here. Back when Jigoro Kano was a young man and developing his ideas for Kodokan Judo and the basic theories of Kodokan Judo, he learned them on the mat. He developed them himself, and he developed them from his instructors as well. And he had problems throwing one of his instructors, the story goes. I think it was either his instructor or a senior member of his club, and he was studying Kito-ryu Jiu-Jitsu, I believe it was. Now, I may be wrong, but I think it was Kito-ryu. And Kano's favorite throw was ukigoshi, the straddling or floating hip throw. He was having a difficult time throwing his sensei with it. And so he said, what's the problem? I'm doing everything else right. What am I doing wrong? And he analyzed it quite a bit, and he came up with the concept of kuzushi. And I think it was the next concept, sukuri, was often used in the Kito-Ryu system and other jiu-jitsu systems of building a technique, of constructing a technique. But to make that happen, Kano first figured out, well, you got to break his balance. You got to break his posture. If I do that, I don't need brute force to do it, to build into the technique, to make the technique work. So he thought about it, he tried it, and sure enough, he came up with the concept of kazushi, and he used it with great success thereafter in throwing people. And you can also use these concepts in ground fighting as well. It's not just for standing throws or techniques. You can use them in ground fighting as well, because you are doing the same thing. You're doing kazushi, sukuri, kake, and you're finishing up with kime. So they work for newaza as well, but we're going to primarily emphasize here our discussion on standing techniques, throwing techniques. So the first thing is kazushi. There are four elements, 3.5 elements. Certainly 3 that the Kodokan developed: kazushi, sukuri, kake. So the first one is kazushi. It means to break something. You're breaking his balance. You're breaking his posture. You're breaking his stride. You're controlling how he moves by controlling his movement. You're breaking his, like I said, movement. The balance is certainly part of that. So if you control his posture, control his movement, you will control his balance. And Kano formulated this, and it's worked ever since, and that is the foundational basis of why judo throws work, that kazushi. Without good kazushi, there ain't going to be any judo. Okay, just that's the way it is. Kazushi is the necessary element that takes judo to that, what makes it what it is. And years ago at a training camp, I remember Jim Bregman saying to me, we had a discussion about it, that good judo is based on good movement. You know, you can't have a good throwing technique without kazushi. And good kazushi is based on movement, controlling the opponent's movement. And that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. So this is a good case of what kazushi is about. That's how important kazushi is. Kazushi is breaking your opponent's balance, his control. You're breaking him down. Okay? You're taking him from a stable to an unstable situation. It could be just split second, and it often is split second. But that's how effective it can be. So that is the essence of what judo is, that kazushi. Okay, so there we have, that's the main point. Now from that we now build our technique. So after I break my opponent down, after I take him from a stable to an unstable situation, with kazushi, I break his balance, I break his posture. Now I want to build up my technique. I want to construct my technique. And sukuri means to construct something, to build something. So now after I've broken him down, I want to build up what I got, which is my technique. So that's the fit in. That's the ability to place your body in the right spot to make him go over it, you know, to throw onto the mat. So you want to, you know, put your hip in the right spot. You want to turn your hips. You want to turn your shoulders, get proper pull. All the elements of the next step, or sukuri, are important. It's how I build that technique after I've broken them down. It's fundamentally important, because what you're going to see is kazushi and sukuri will blend in together. There'll be a seamless blend of kazushi to sukuri when you do it right. And when you do it right, you can feel it. That's what the Japanese have always called, you got to feel your judo. And you'll feel it when you have that nice blend of, you broke his balance, you're fit in just perfectly, and man, he's ready to go. Okay, so that's sukuri. That's the building of the technique. The next phase is actually applying the technique, the execution, the kake, okay? And that's to execute the technique, to make it happen, to put him in the air, to sweep his foot, put him in the air. That's what it means. You're suspending him in air and over your body or across your body. Somehow you are throwing him. You're actually applying, executing the movement. It's happening, okay? Now, Kano, I believe, after reading a lot about this, his belief was that kake, after you throw him, you finish him down. You finish the movement right there. That finishes it. Whether you makikomi, you follow through, wrap around, winding, and finish on top of him, or immediately go to stand there and throw him, or immediately go to a ground technique. Kake was the culmination. That was the it. But I think, at least the way I look at it, it makes sense to me. There's a fourth element, and a lot of other people have thought this well, okay? Not just me. But there's a fourth element. That's that follow-through, that finish. is kime, what I always call the kime, which means to finish or to focus directly and finish it right there. Okay. Other people have called it zanshin, which means to finish it where that's the end of it, that culminates it. So that you can use that phrase as well. And I've heard other people use that as well too. But I've always called it kime for many years. So look at it like a baseball batter. You're hitting a baseball and you hit it and you just don't stop after you hit the ball and drop the bat. You follow through. Okay. You're throwing a baseball. You throw it, and just as the ball leaves your hand, you just don't stop and pull your hand back. You follow through. That's a fair analogy, I guess, but that's the idea of kime. So after you throw your opponent, after you throw him down to the ground, you follow through. You finish it. You make sure it's there. Now, you might land on him in a makikomi situation. It might be such a situation you have to land on him. That could be a situation. But generally, you want to throw and control him so you can finish him on the ground, or you can throw him so hard, you can control how hard he lands, that you may just want to run away, if you're in a fight. But in any way, you want to throw him and finish him. Okay, you want to follow through. And often we see in today's competitive judo, sambo, any of the fighting sports, where you throw somebody and immediately, for insurance sake, the referee might not give you ippon. You go right to the ground. You might pin him. You might go right for an arm lock or a strangle. Whatever it may be, the kime is the finishing touch. It's the third and a half element in a series of events that leads you to control your opponent's body and get him where you want him to go. So you're taking from a stable to unstable position. So let's recap them here real quick. Kazushi is the first thing. You break his balance. You break his posture. Number 2 is sukuri. You build up the technique. You put your body in position that you can now throw him, okay, or control him further. Kake is the third thing. You finish you throw him. That's the execution of the throw. He's in the air. You got him down. You're following. There he is. He's in trouble. The fourth one, the third and a half, if you will, is the kime, is the follow through, to make sure you finish the throw and make it a total package. Okay, don't just hope you just throw him. Finish him on the ground, to finish him there. So make it that total package to follow through. So those are the, I guess, 3.5 elements. They're the essence of every judo technique. And again, it all based on good kazushi, the good controlling of your opponent's movement. And really, when you look at this, judo is kinesiology in action. I mean, kinesiology is the study of human movement. And what better thing to really study the human movement with than judo? I mean, it's fascinating. And how you can not only have to control your own body, but you control your opponent's body. It's different than gymnastics, which is a very difficult sport, don't get me wrong. But in that case, a gymnast has to concern himself or herself with controlling his or her own body. Okay? In judo, or any fighting sport, but where we grapple, like in wrestling as well, not only do I have to control my body and my own movement, I want to control his body and his movement as well. So it makes it's an onus, it's a double whammy I have to do to have better control of my opponent's movement. So that's it. The 4 elements of 3.5 elements of kazushi, sukuri, kake, and kime. That being said, hey, thanks for watching, and I always enjoy doing these shows, and I hope you enjoy watching them as much as I enjoy doing them. So thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next time.